Hello, internet friends, and welcome to Keep the Game Moving with Banana Chan. Thank you so much for joining us. This is awesome.
Thank you so much for having me. Excited to be here.
If you don't know Banana Chan, she has been in this space for a very long time, doing all sorts of really cool things. And one of the things that I am fascinated by is how you kind of you walk this line between super niche, cool, weird stuff and like super, I don't know what the opposite of the super marketable, I guess.
Mass market, yeah.
Yeah, mass market.
Yeah.
And that dichotomy, is there any schizophrenia there, or?
Oh no, I think I just like doing a lot of things. I get bored easily, so that's one of the reasons why I like to just do many kinds of different things.
So how, it's interesting because you are very, you do a lot in the LARP space, which that's a whole world of GMing that I think is very different, but has some of the same similarities and some of the same, if you're a good GM in a LARP, you'll be a good GM in a tabletop game. You just have to remember more rules, really.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But how did you get your start GMing?
Oh gosh, so I guess I got my start playing LARPs more or less. So I started playing LARPs first, or at least like diving really into LARPs first, and then I started playing tabletop games more heavily. So previously, I had played a D&D session like as a kid, as a teen, and I just didn't really enjoy it back then. But then, like as an adult, when I started playing them, I was like, wow, this is really cool. Like I didn't know that you could play outside of like a fantasy setting. Like I thought that all tabletop games were set in a fantasy setting. And then I discovered like PBTA, I discovered like, Blades in the Dark, like all these other different systems and themes and all these other things. So from there, as I started getting like more and more excited about this stuff, like I tend to get really into something like when I'm like really excited about something. So I would spend like days and days like researching, finding like ways to like play a thing, like if I can't play it, face to face, and I would find a way to play it. And so I guess like I deep dived into tabletop games in general after deep diving into LARP. And then sort of thinking like, oh, maybe I should like, GM a bit. Like, let's see how that whole thing is like. And so I would say like GMing is a lot more work than just playing, for sure, which is why even though I do enjoy doing it, it is like um, I feel like sometimes I just want to take a break from that and just be a player or like just I don't know, be an audience member versus like going into GMing.
I wonder if that's why you make so many GM-less games as a designer, because that's interesting, huh?
I do feel for the GM. I'm not gonna lie. It's like a lot of work. It's a lot of prep. It's like, so much to not even just to remember, but just like a lot of stuff to like keep on you and just trying to like, maintain a fun environment for your players. So I do feel for the GM. I'm not gonna lie.
So what have you seen are some of the commonalities between, a good LARP GM and a good tabletop GM?
I would say in most instances, I think a good LARP GM or facilitator, they take on more of like a collaborative role, right? So they prefer collaborating with the players, asking questions, trying to make sure that everyone has a fun time, everyone has their time in the spotlight. And I think that sort of crosses over with tabletop role-playing games as well, where it's just like you want to make sure that everyone has a good time. Everyone's just like, sharing the spotlight and everyone's also collaborating to the story. I think that's like the one signifier of like a quote unquote good GM or facilitator or moderator, whatever term you wanna use. And in general, just like making sure that that everyone's just like okay with setting expectations and setting boundaries, right? So like if you're expecting to play like a I don't know, like a sci-fi game with like, cyberpunk themes, you're not like going into this game, that's actually, I don't know, like a fantasy setting
Right.
with like castles and stuff, like making sure that everyone is on the same page and making sure that they all communicate clearly.
Yeah, I always say, let's all make sure we're all playing the same game here, that we
Right.
all want to play the same game. I also think one area where LARPs were ahead of the curve was in the importance of safety tools
Hmm.
and the importance of the safety of players. And now that's becoming a lot more common, thankfully, in tabletop. But I think LARP stuff was there a lot earlier.
Yeah, I agree. I think with LARP, especially because you're using your physical bodies, you're like embodying your character, you're like, acting out the movements and stuff. There are going to be times where, things might need a little bit more calibration, things might need a little bit more negotiation. So, yeah, I think that I'm a strong proponent for like a negotiation between players. Like, there are going to be scenes that you want to play out that are going to get like, very dark and very like intense, right? So you want to make sure that the other person who you're acting out the scene with is going to enjoy that as well.
So, how do you, as a GM, sort of introduce safety tools? Because I sort of have, if I'm running like in my head, I have different calibrations. Like if I'm running a con game, I'm going as DEFCON 1, every safety tool I can think of, because I don't know I don't know usually most of the people there, and I have a whole spiel about how because like if I run paranoia, I'll say like we're going to spend 4 hours doing awful things to each other, and that's going to be okay. But if it's not okay, here's how we deal with it, but how do you introduce that?
That's a great way of introducing paranoia, honestly. I think that it's like you said, like, it depends on the table, it depends on like the group that you're playing with, it depends on if it's a con game, if it's a one shot, or if it's a campaign game. So usually with one shots, I like to do like a quick bit of workshopping, so nothing too intense. I know that with LARP, you can have like a full day of workshopping, right? But with con games, I like to just have like a little bit, right? So let's run through the lines and veils. I will start. Let me, introduce a line or a veil that I think should be in the game. And that way it sort of sets the standard for like, okay, so if this one person who's like leading the game, who's the GM, says, it's okay for us to have lines and veils, I'm going to add my own. So it sort of like sets that, like, it makes it more normalized and sets sort of like a comfort level with everyone. And I think also pretending that there is, an instance where you need to use the X card. So like if you're playing with X cards and O cards, then saying something like, okay, I'm going to pretend that I said something controversial, like, you know, I don't like kittens, or I think that cats
We're
are
done. This show is over.
right, exactly. Or it's just like, I don't like cats. And I'm going to ask everyone to tap the X card, or if it's an online game, type in X in the chat, or just like use X arms or something like that. And then I'm going to say, I'm going to rewind, redo the scene, and say, you know what? Some people love cats, but for me, I don't especially like cats. So that way it's sort of like, lets people know how to use the tool, first of all. And secondly, it's okay to use the tool. And so, they would do the X card thing. We would say like, our thank yous for using the X card, and then move on.
You brought up something there that actually I am embarrassed to say I've never heard of. Walk me through the O card.
Oh, so the O card is if you see something that you really like in the game, or if it could be like another player did something that's really cool, or the GM did something really cool, or you did something really cool, you would tap the O card and you would say like, I'm really enjoying this right now. I want to see more of this.
Nice. Okay, so it's fan mail or that's okay. Great. That's
Right,
I like
exactly.
that. One of the challenges I've found as we've had to move from playing in person to playing on Zoom is it's actually when I play in person, the X card is on the table and it's a physical
Mhm.
thing there, and that really helps kind of keep it in the forefront of people's minds. And I've found as I've been playing on streaming games, that's a little bit of a challenge. Like people kind of forget about it.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, 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 definitely. I think, making sure that we use the chat a lot. So if it's like a streamed game, obviously, you're playing for an audience, right? So that's going to be a little different from like playing with just a group of friends like
Yeah.
online. So the X card does get a little lost when it comes to live streaming, I think. So it's like a little trickier to manage. Luckily, people have moderators. There's always like, people keeping an eye on the chat, right? Like it shouldn't be just the GM's job to check on the chat. It should be everyone's job and making sure that everyone's having a good time, because it is really distracting. Like for a GM, if you're managing the story, you're managing the players, you're managing like, all this other stuff, checking the chat should not be your first priority.
Yeah,
Like,
I always joke that running a game on stream, the GM is 50% game show host, like 40% GM, and like 10% referee. It's a whole weird job.
yeah, it's really tricky. It's really tricky to manage. So it's nice to like, maybe tell other players, like, if something comes up, please let me know, or we could take a break if it's like a live stream. If it's, a regular game, that's totally fine. We could just like take a break whenever we need to. But like, especially if it's a live stream, it's good to just be like, okay, we're going to have an ad break here, or like, let's just settle something real quick now.
Yeah, that's actually a really nice tool to be able to just say like, we're going to take 10 here, and just talk this out. It's interesting. I have found, so I don't have a lot of experience in the LARP world. I've done a little bit of it. And I have found that in LARP games, GM time is like a player resource, because you're like, you're running around scampering through the Midsummer Night's Dream forest, and I got to find a GM to do this thing. And it was a little, as somebody who, I joked, I just thought of this yesterday, but everybody talks about main character syndrome. I think I actually have side character syndrome, where I'd rather be like the one guy over here doing the weird stuff and making comments every once in a while. And in a LARP, that was actually really challenging for me, because I think now, good LARP GMs, I think, are looking for that and are trying to, like you said, give everybody the spotlight. But especially when it's a spread out one, it's really hard to do.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think with larger games, like it sounds like your game was a little bit larger, so maybe like it was like probably 40 plus people, 30 plus people.
It was so. One of the largest mistakes of my life, Gen Con SoCal, which probably was the largest mistake of mine, but Gen Con SoCal, it was one of those like combat simulator LARPs.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah,
which is like a whole different, and like, so the idea was there were two rooms, and one room was like the North Korean, well, yeah, they were real world, but I'm gonna actually one was like War Room A and War Room B, and like there was all this going back and forth, and it was Byzantinely complex,
right?
And it was not my scene, but it was that was where I really felt like GM time was the resource that was super important. And I don't know how, since you've had experience in this, like how do you make that not the case for players?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it depends on the game. So with the game, like you were talking about, more facilitators, more GMs, the better, right? So if you're having like a large scale game, you want to have maybe like one GM or one facilitator per every like 4 players. And I know that's probably overkill in some instances, but like, in a situation where it's like very difficult to like manage when it comes to like interpersonal relationships, if it's like very highly intense, like emotionally, if it's highly intense physically, if it's like a lot of mental, energy that's involved in trying to solve like various puzzles or various pieces of like this game, then I would say like more facilitators better. For me personally, I like playing and running and writing smaller games. So the max amount, like in terms of player count, would probably be around like the 6 to 8 range, in terms of like the maximum player count. My sweet spot is always like 4 to 5 players. Like I love 4 to 5 player games. I love like that, not just that intimacy, but also like the relationships and like the weird emotional stuff that comes out of like a 4 to 5 player game, because you can develop so many like intense relationships, and so much intensity can come from play like that.
Yeah, I always look at the Fiasco relationship web as being like the platonic ideal of a role-playing game, where like this interconnected web of, I actually use so GMs, if you're out there and you're creating like a con game that is a preset, like use the Fiasco tools to create the relationships of your PCs and NPCs, and it'll just build the story for you.
Yeah, definitely. I think that so that's funny because this is the second time someone has mentioned Fiasco today to me, and,
Well,
definitely
so I'll just tell
oh,
you, I think Fiasco might be the perfect role playing game.
I think
I
it's great, yeah.
I am such a huge Fiasco fan.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and I think it's the perfect like encapsulated experience. It's like everything you want from an 8-hour game in 3 hours.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And I also got introduced into LARP through well, I guess like not introduced into LARP so much as like I got really interested in LARP through Jason Morningstar's Juggernaut.
Hmm.
I don't know if you ever played it, but like that was one of the games where I was just like, oh, I want more of this kind of experience. Like I played that thing like maybe 3 or 4 times. Like it's a one-shot game. It's not like one of those games that has like a lot of replayability, but like I was really into it. So I
And I mean,
think
I think playing it with different people can definitely change the experience.
oh yeah, absolutely. And I think like if you're interested in more games like that with like more interpersonal dynamics or like, weird relationships, definitely check out Juggernaut.
Hmm. Yeah, and I mean, I even for creating like in PC relationships and con games, I even use, if you want the super simple version, the Shablahiri Roach has the really easy. You like the person on your right for some reason, you don't like the person on your left for some reason. Why? And
Right.
that's a great way to just really fast create tension and interesting relationships among your PCs.
Yeah, exactly. And the funny thing is that like relationship creation that way also generates motivation behind your character as well. So it's like a quick and easy way of like doing that motivation.
Yeah, yeah. So you just one of your so this year you have like a game every month, which is
Oh
insane.
god. Oh
Uh,
no.
uh, and what a year to do that. Like you picked the perfect time. But you recently came out with, and I can't wait to get it in my little hands. Jiangshi, which is a fascinating game to me because it is simultaneously like super approachable but super specific.
Mhm.
And like, how did you? So tell us. So go walk through the give us the elevator pitch of the game. But then, how did you come up with this?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Jiangshi is a game that was written by Sanfeng Lim and I. We designed it, and we had it published through Wet Ink Games. Actually, it was a publication through Wet Ink Games and Game and a Curry, my company. And the elevator pitch for it is that players are playing a Chinese family in the 1920s, running a restaurant in the daytime, faced with oppression and all the terrible things that come with running a small business. And at night, these Jiangshi hopping vampires come out and attack everyone. So it sounds like an intense game, but in actuality, I think that most of the games that I play in or that I run, they end up being like Bob's Burgers type of
Right, some slapstick
hilarity.
comedy comes in. Yeah.
Right, because 'cause you're playing a family, like, you're going to have, like, silly family relationships. And, sure, the paranormal terrors are, like, terrifying and, like, scary and, like, really bad and looming, but at the same time, you're normal people trying to cope with, like, an irregular situation, I think.
I already have a dream scenario for this that involves like ancestral family recipes
Yes,
and
that's
like the
awesome.
guardians of the recipes and all that stuff.
That's
Um,
awesome.
but it's interesting because like it is so specific, and it speaks to an experience, like a lived
Mhm.
experience of um, uh, APA immigrants to the West. And like, where did that idea come from?
So Sen and I have this Google Doc where we just vomit, like word vomit, all of our ideas onto. And so when we first started collaborating, we were just like, okay, what are we going to work on? Let's just make up some ideas and brainstorm and see where we go, right? So we have like this document still being in use. That's why like I have so many games being brought out like with Sen. So like if you see one of our games, you'll know that's from that Word document. But basically, yeah, it's just been like, brainstorming back and forth. And eventually we settled on this idea where it's like, oh, okay, so, the idea of food is really important to us. The idea of, being a part of an immigrant family is really important to us and personal. And like, it is something that is our lived experience, right? We know what this is like. Um, and so we started playing around with that. We wanted to have an experience where you're like, running a restaurant. And we didn't come from a restaurant family. So we asked our friends, we interviewed people, we did a lot of research on like, what are Chinese restaurants like in the 1920s? And we set it to the 1920s because we wanted to have some separation from like now times. But we also didn't want it to be like too far in the past where it was closer to the Chinese Exclusion Act when it just like came out. So we set it to the 1920s, which is like, when you think of the 1920s, you think of like it was like a golden era, right? Like everyone was like having a great time, but it turns out not a lot of the POCs are actually having a great time. Like some POCs are actually going through like a lot during that time frame. So we wanted to capture that, that part of history as well. So like it's sort of like an educational tool, but we learned a lot from it doing the work as well.
Yeah, I think anytime I've done a historical scenario, like the research that you do to build something like that, you end up going down all these weird roads, and just finding, like sadly, I only ran the game once, and one player at the table ruined it, but I made a game around, I found out that like in San Francisco in 1900, they found the Black Plague in Chinatown. And like nobody knows how it got, and they quarantined by wrapping barbed wire around 5 blocks of Chinatown and just said, only white people can go in and out, which is a bizarre rule in and of itself, not a great quarantine, and I was just like, this is a Cthulhu game. It just like, it's already written, and but as you go and you deep dive into these things, you find so many weird layers that just add to the story. And then your players become historical characters.
Yeah. Absolutely.
All that stuff. When you talked about sort of the POC, non-POC experience, and you are playing in this game, you are playing the players, all the characters are POC, are APA individuals, and that can bring some, that can bring some issues and some questions, stuff like that. I love, I don't know if you've seen Harlem Unbound,
yes.
the Cthulhu Summit. It has an entire chapter on sort of how to play characters that are not from your experience and that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. How does Jiangshi sort of bring in some of that?
We have that as well, where we have a section where not only do we have calibration tools, but we also have a section on, how are you going to play a Chinese character? So we collaborate with James Mendez Hodes on writing that section together, because even though Sen and I are both Chinese, we're not exactly sensitivity consultants. We're going to miss things, right? Mm-hmm. We're not going to be able to see everything that our audience might see. So we brought him along as like a sensitivity consultant, and we worked together on trying to figure out like, how can you play this character respectfully in a good way, but also trying to like, be creative with your character. And, we wrote up a section where it's just like, if you feel like you've made a mistake, like, don't be too hard on yourself, like rewind, redo. That's what calibration is there for. If you are playing this on a live stream, we do recommend, and this is like on one of the first pages of the book, we do recommend that you play it with, APA characters, or sorry, APA players. But if you're playing this with like a group of friends, it's totally fine to just explore some feelings, explore some, stuff that maybe you haven't thought about before. So this game is written and designed for APA players first and foremost, but then it's also like for other BIMPOC or POC players, and then of course other people who non-POC, non-BIMPOC players who want to try and think of different ways of playing, think of like, different stuff that maybe they haven't thought about before. Like, what's the experience like for an Asian character?
Yeah, and I mean, to me, that's a twofer because you get to play a really fun game with like a world that maybe you haven't thought about, and you get a little bit of the experience and hopefully gain a little understanding
Mhm.
of the not just struggles but triumphs of these other lives that that I will just never I can never understand them, but maybe through a little experience I can touch it a little and I can get a sense of a little sense of living it.
Right, exactly. And like our core, like the core of the game is about like, weird family relationships, right? Like the I wouldn't say just the struggles, but also just like the joys of like being in a silly family. And everyone knows like, what it's like to be in like maybe a silly family or just like having those like weird relationships with like people who are close to you or people who like have brought you up. So I think that it's accessible in that way. And at the core of the game, it is about that family.
I want to combine. So if you can't tell, I'm already in love with Jiangshi. But uh, I want to combine it with there's a board game called slightly unfortunate name called Walkstar that is about a family running a
Oh,
Chinese restaurant. And it's a real
mhm.
time, like crazy hectic game of like they ordered pot stickers. We got to get the stuff for pot stickers, and I'm like that's the day part of the game, and then the night is like the role playing like Jiangshi sort of thing. I'm
That's super fun. Yeah.
already getting con ideas for this. Um, so you talked about a little bit. You mentioned James and his Hodes. Uh, it seems like in a lot of your work, and this is awesome, and everyone should do it. You're involving sensitivity readers and sensitivity
Mhm.
consultants and that sort of thing. Uh, if I'm a GM and I maybe don't have access to, I'm not designing the game, and I don't have access to sensitivity readers or that sort of thing, how can I get like some of that sensitivity and awareness, and I mean in my game without without being able to hire a sensitivity consultant?
Yeah, I would say definitely checking out Twitter, and checking out social media, right? So, like, trying to find people who have different viewpoints, right? And seeing what they write. Not necessarily reaching out to them, like, obviously, you're probably not friends with them at first, but, like, seeing the tweets that they write, seeing, like, the stuff that they post, and seeing, what those viewpoints are. I think that exposure is great, when it comes to, like, seeing what people think, and seeing how they react to certain pieces of media. So like say for example, I don't know, like I'm not going to name any specific names, but like say there was a movie that had like a white lead whose character was actually Asian, for example.
Porn from today's headlines.
Right, so like what is the Asian audience's interpretation of that? Like what are they saying? What are their, what's their review like of this piece of media? And so just like seeing what people say, and this is going to be a nuanced thing, right? Like different people are going to have different interpretations of different things, even if they're from like one specific demographic. Like not all Asians are going to be a part of like this monolithic idea of like you know, what the perfect movie or what the perfect product is going to be like. But like at least exposing yourself to some of that would be helpful in trying to create a game.
I think it's right, and I think just in general, follow people of color on Twitter. It just change your Twitter feed up so that there are voices of color in it. You'll be better for it. I mean, there was a time last year during the I don't want to say the height of the Black Lives Matter movement because hopefully the height is still to come. But like during the challenges last year, there was a time when people were lifting up in gaming in every facet of the world. They were lifting up those voices, and then it always happens, kind of recedes a little. But
Mhm.
get those voices in your life, and I mean. Banana's an awesome follow on Twitter, especially if you like Taco Bell. That's
I do love Taco Bell.
And
So it's
those weird
shifted
Instagram
now.
things that I don't go to.
Oh
It seems
God, the
like you go
worst
to every
thing.
one of those like museum Instagram things that are.
We just happen to have a lot in our area. I'm in New York, so that's like everywhere
Yeah,
where
I'm
we're
in San
at.
Francisco. We get plenty of, like the ice cream museum or whatever. But you always have you always like go with a coordinated outfit. That's the impressive part. Like
I make a plan before I go to any place. Like in San Francisco, I made a plan of places I want to go
do you have
to.
a costume change for everyone? Is that
Oh, absolutely. You have to have the costumes change.
nice? Uh, so right now you are in, I don't know if it's enviable or unenviable. You're in the position, you have 2 games on Kickstarter right now.
It's a
What's
mistake.
that like?
It's
Are you
stressful.
okay? Let's just check in.
I think I'm okay. Yeah. So after all of this, I am planning on a spa day and just like not checking social media, not gonna, do any work, not gonna look at my computer, no screens. But yeah, it's been very stressful, but very good. Like I would say that I'm very proud of the work that Sadia Bees and Senfon Lim and I have done on 2 separate Kickstarters. They're both like,
Yeah.
those are my 2 design partners.
So let's talk about the LARP one first, because I just have less to say about it because it's not my world. But let me see, I'm gonna get this right. Suburban Consumption of the Monstrous. And
Yes.
that cult video that you made for that that's why I'm not Kickstarting the game. I'm terrified by that video. Go to the Kickstarter page for this. Here, I'm gonna be a good host and put this up. They created this video that's like the welcome video to this not at all a cult. And it's genuinely terror. It's like something out of Midsummer or something. It's like Suburban Midsummer.
Oh yeah, don't you want to join clarity? Don't you
Midsummer.
want to gain some clarity?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So how, like, this game is to me another example of and if I guess I'm defining your oeuvre as like super specific, like glimpses, you like are slice of life people don't want to live. That's your
Yeah.
oeuvre. That's
Oh yeah, absolutely.
and that seems to be this Kickstarter is like several different versions of that.
Yeah, I think so too. So, that's a really good way of putting it. So this Kickstarter is for Suburban Consumption of the Monsters. It is by Sadia Bees and I. We have written 14 different LARPs. And in this anthology, we split it up into player count. So like the first chapter is for 1 player, the second chapter is for 2, 3, 4 players. So I think the max is like 8 players. So 8 players is like the most that you'll ever encounter in our games. But then again, it's also like a scalable 8. So it could be like 6 players to 8 players or whatever. Anyway, I'm digressing. But this anthology, it is basically about, it's a bunch of horror games, right? So it's horror games that are inspired by the movies that we love. So they're A24 movies. They're Channel Zero, which is a TV show. That's great. We love, Coherence, The Invitation, Get Out, all of these movies that are that have that setting of being in a suburban environment, first of all, but also being around a dinner table or set in like a specific place where you're like having food or where you're eating, right? So that's something that we wanted to play on. So having the idea of consuming while you're playing as a part of this weird environment. And I would say that we did a pretty good job at them. Like they're weird for sure. I've been having a lot of weird dreams.
The juxtaposition of like, and I mean, as you said, other movies have done this for a while, but the juxtaposition of sort of the banality of suburban life and then the awful things that happen is really, I think, a lot of fun. And to your point, creating it around that shared experience of like, the potluck or the whatever is really adds a layer to the characters. It becomes, sort of a lived experience.
Thank you. I hope it scares people, but in a fun way.
It's funny. I don't like horror stuff. So like I don't watch horror movies. But I like horror games for some reason. I don't know why.
Ooh.
I think there's maybe a remove, like not, no jump scares and that sort of thing. I don't know.
So we have simulated a jump scare in one of our games.
How, don't spoil anything, but like give us a hint of how you do that.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of our games, Sadia actually designed this one, where I believe it's 4 players, 3 or 4 players, and it's about a family where the youngest has just passed away. So I would say, like, content warning for most of these games, they do deal with like very heavy subject matter. That's why they're not for kids; they're mostly for adults. The youngest has passed away in this game, and basically the player who plays the youngest plays a ghost, and they're underneath a dinner table. So they're sitting under the table for the entirety of the game. And this family is just having like a normal conversation. They're just, eating, doing whatever. But every so often, the person who's playing like the youngest character would like scratch at the bottom of like the dinner table to simulate like a ghost, or they would grab someone's ankle to like possess them temporarily. And that ankle grab mechanic is just like, oh my God, it's like a jolt, right? Like you're just like, I did not expect that to happen. I knew it was going to happen, but I just didn't know when.
Wow, okay, that's a cool idea. I like that. Yeah. Because I always talk about how in horror games, it's really hard. It's easy to scare the character, but it's hard to scare the player.
Mm-hmm.
When I think about it, really only Dread is a game that scares the player instead of the character. But that could, that grabbing my ankle under the table could definitely do it. That would be something. I love also the anthology idea, which I think is really neat. It gives you, a lot of different ways you can go. And it's also, as a GM, like I will buy books like that just to get ideas from, and to see all, and this is 14 different ideas that you can borrow.
Yeah, absolutely. Feel free to, borrow some of these mechanics, because I think that they're not just for LARP, right? Like I think you could definitely integrate some of these into tabletop gaming experiences if you wanted to.
I'm going to GM my next game under the table.
That would be hilarious. Oh my God. Yeah.
I don't see that going well for anyone. I'm just going to get kicked.
Yeah. It's kind of weird, like playing under the table a little bit, just a heads up.
Especially when everyone else is eating. I'd be jealous. Like I would be a hungry ghost. I'm just like, hey, come on, drop something, will you? And so what, this was interesting because it's a collaboration. So, as you're coming up with these very specific things, how do you, collaborating with somebody as a design is kind of like collaborating with somebody as a GM. There are agreements, and there's a give and take and that sort of thing. And, we all hope, and usually it is sort of, oh, your idea just made my idea more awesome. But there are also going to be times when, you have to give something up because, for the partnership to work and things like that. So, how did you find that experience? I mean, you collaborate on almost everything. So I'm interested, like, do you intentionally seek that out?
I try to. I also I think like with collaborators, I like seeing, folks who have like similar ideas or are just like into similar things as I am. That's like one of the ways I like look for people to like work with. But also like I think like with game design, or specifically like with this anthology itself, there is a leader on, a specific game, right? So like if I were to write a game, if I were to write a LARP, and this is like, a few pages long, once I'm done with it, I would ask Sadia to like go through the document, let me know if there's, any changes they would like to make, or if there's anything that just doesn't make any sense. Then we just go back and forth on it. And I think that something like that, like, collaboration, it definitely makes you feel like your work is not, that's not precious to begin with, but just like it's important, it is precious, but it's not like you're okay with letting it go. right? You're okay with letting that piece of art go and just like letting someone else interpret it, because at the end of the day, these are games, these are going to be interpreted by other people. And if it doesn't make sense to an audience, then, or if it doesn't, actually convey the feeling that you want to convey, then maybe it's good to like, have another set of eyes, like go through it and brainstorm some cool mechanics that you can try to use to fix it up.
So I'm interested in your opinion of this, because in my opinion, and this might say more about me than anything else, collaboration is actually more work. It's better work, but I think I put more effort into things I'm collaborating people with than when I'm just doing it myself.
Yes and no. I think it depends.
Please disagree. Feel free.
Yeah. I think it depends. So I think it depends on the work. I think that sometimes it does make for like a richer experience when you're like, doing something together. But then there are instances where it is good to work solo, right? So take for instance, like you have a short deadline, you have to get, all this stuff out and you have to like get a thing done. Yeah, go ahead and take the lead on writing, make the first draft. But then other people should be able to like look at it and see if it makes sense. So that's what I think of when I think of like collaborating. Like there are going to be instances where you are the single-threaded leader. I just did my Scrum training, so
there we go.
I'm throwing out a word there, or a term there. But yeah, there are going to be instances where you are going to be a leader on like, on writing or development or designing. But then there should be other voices there to like help you develop the thing further.
Yeah, that's a really interesting. I think there are so many different ways of collaborating. Like I had my buddies Josh and John on who only co-GM. Like they only run scenarios together, because I'm fascinated by this, because the few times that I have co-GM'd, it's been a really great experience for me, but it's been a really challenging experience for me because I am the epitome of the like hammy, like where's the spotlight sort of person, and so that knowing when to come forward and come back is really challenging. And the bifurcation of whether it's some people are like, okay, you're the GM for this, I'm the GM for this, that sort of thing. It's a really interesting way to sort of mix it all up. All right, now the other Kickstarter I think I'm super excited about, Exquisite Crime. Is that the total title? There's a subtitle, I think, but
Exquisite Crime.
And Exquisite Crime. There we go.
We always drop the and we're just like, we'll just call it Exquisite Crime.
This is fascinating to me because it is it's almost like a board. Like I don't know if you've played Telestrations.
Yes,
but it's like Telestrations, the role playing game.
Yes, that's very accurate. Yeah.
I mean, that just sold it to me right there. But I love the aesthetic of the game, and that makes me like, how do you start with the aesthetic and that sort of advises the design, or because I find your aesthetics are so tied in to your designs in your games?
Yeah, so we did not start with an aesthetic for this. We usually don't, but we do start with a mood and a setting. So for this, so actually this might be an outlier because we wanted to make a game with an exquisite corpse mechanic. So we did we played around with like the idea of like using exquisite corpse as like a mechanic in role-playing games, and we were like, okay, so what would make sense? Like, why are you using this exquisite corpse mechanic? Who are you? Like, what kind of characters would do this?
Unpack exquisite corpse quickly.
Oh, right, yes. So an exquisite corpse is a surrealist collaborative drawing exercise that where basically one player would draw, or one person would draw the first panel of a drawing, and then the second person would draw the second panel, and the third person would draw the third panel, but everything is hidden, right? So only the first person, only each player would know what their panel looks like. But at the very end, you would unfold it and you would reveal this weird, surreal thing. And usually it's very funny. It's very fun. And if you're playing with artists, then they make some really cool stuff.
The best part is when you're playing with like either two non-artists sandwiching an artist or two artists sandwiching a non-artist, because like all of a sudden everything's great, it all devolves, everything's, you know, you get this weird thing. It's
or playing with non-artists in general, like they come up with the most fun and silly things. So it's like at the end of it, you're just like, this is hilarious. I don't know how it happened, but this is really funny. I love it. So yeah, that's basically what the mechanic is. And on top of that, we also have another mechanic for Zener cards, which I could talk about later. So the game itself, we were doing some thinking. We were thinking like, you know, what would make a fun theme for this mechanic
make a fun
itself.
Murder game.
Right, exactly. But then we didn't think about murders at first. We were just like, maybe this should just be about murders. Let's just do murders. And so that's what we landed on. I mean, I love a good clue murder.
Right there you go. You brought it back.
But yeah, so like, so basically we were like doing some thinking about that, and we were just like, okay, what about psychics? What about psychic detectives? What about psychic detectives that are trying to solve a crime? And also it's surreal and it's weird, and you know, it's got that Matt Berry voice of like, you know, everything's just like funny and like goofy.
Just randomly mispronounce a word every now and then.
Yeah, exactly. So like, let's do that. And so we did a little bit of research on the theme that we settled on. It turns out that the exercise of like spirit drawing, they're called orographs. So there's like a thing called orographs, but then that's like, you know, that traces back to Fuji planchette drawings. And like, there's all the stuff that we did research on with like Arthur Conan Doyle, like you know, it all came together somehow, like in our research, where like everything was like interconnected, and it all came back to like planchette drawing from like the Ming Dynasty, and it was just like a ridiculous amount of research that we did for this game that's just like silly and goofy. But yeah, so basically that's the game. So like the entire game, you just like you're drawing up the suspects, you're drawing up the witnesses, you're drawing up the scene of the crime and the victim, based on the prompts that you're given. So you would have like different prompts, you would have a setting booklet that you would play from. I believe right now we have 6 different settings. So you get to choose whichever one you want and play from there. And when you're creating your characters, you would use Zener cards to determine what your character's traits are. So you would start off with like a basic card, right? Your basic card could be like, you are the ancient psychic. You've been at this company, at this psychic detective consulting agency forever. By the way, the psychic detective consulting agency is called Griffinfly. So we did a little bit of lore writing on that part too.
I guess so, yeah.
But yeah, so like, you know, using the Zener cards, if you want to do like a more deep dive into character creation, you would ask one of the players, hey, what card am I holding up? And they would have to answer like, you know, circle, star, wavy lines, whatever. And based on their answer, if they answer correctly, they would get one trait. If they answer incorrectly, they would get another trait. And usually the incorrect trait or the incorrect guess will give you a trait that's sort of like you're a con artist, or you're a fake psychic, or you're like you've just recently lost your psychic abilities, something along those lines. Versus like if you guess correctly, maybe you just won the lottery, maybe you are trying to find another job, maybe you are like the golden child of this detective agency or something like that.
I think it's a really, I mean, the idea of sort of in character drawing is a fascinating idea to me, of having like, you know, your character as an RPG, like infuse what you're drawing is kind of a really neat twist on things.
Thank you. Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
And another collaboration.
Yes, yeah. It is a collaboration with Senfoam Lim. This is one of our Google Doc games. So we're just
That's what you should call your company, Google Doc Game. Form a company. I'm sure Google won't mind.
Oh yeah, absolutely not.
Maybe they'll buy you.
Hey,
Yeah.
I'll take some Google money.
Yeah. It's about time somebody in RPGs sold out.
Right.
Speaking of which, let's talk about your work with Wizards of the Coast.
I'll happily answer that question.
No, but I do think, like, as we said in the beginning, it's really interesting to me that you have kind of these two, you're in all these different worlds, and you worked on the Betrayal Scooby-Doo game, which I thought was fantastic.
Thank you.
You've written some stuff for Wizards. And so how is that? I mean, obviously the difference, because with these collaboration things, you're the creator. And so, I'm guessing you have a lot more latitude in that and that sort of thing. Whereas in the other ones, you're in a very constrained, like, here's what we want you to do this sort of thing. So how are those experiences? How are they both satisfying?
Yeah, so I would say when you're doing mass market, it's satisfying in the sense that you're getting your name out there, right? So you are getting recognition, and that's about it, honestly. Like, so you're getting recognition.
Right.
The pay
getting paid is not nothing.
The pay isn't always necessarily great. So I just wanted to like set expectations there. If you're like, doing something for, a certain word count or something like that, the pay isn't always going to be great.
Right.
And not just that, you're not going to have these contract jobs like come up every so often, right? Like, you're going to have, cool write-ups, and you're going to have like cool, I don't know, swag or something like that, but you don't get a percentage, right? So you don't get to pay all of your bills at once. But if you do a passion project, like, collaborating with another designer, then, it's more about the work. Like, you're more excited for it because, not only are you getting paid more, this is like your thing. But if you sell it to a publisher, now here's the weird thing, right? Like, if you sell it to a publisher, then they have control over your work. So they can dictate basically like, oh, this get changed. This other thing might get changed or stay the same or whatever.
That corpse game, but we think it should be in the future.
Right. Which is like totally fine, because this is written in the contract. You should, hopefully you're able to like read through the contract and like, be able to figure out like what you want in the contract and what you don't want. And also like the pay, because it's percentage wise, it hopefully is a little better. But when it comes to like self-publishing, you have creative control over everything. Mostly everything. Your key stakeholder is basically the customer, right? The end customer is your key stakeholder. Funny
but
joke
you have
there,
to do,
but, yeah.
but then the marketing of the self-publishing thing is definitely more of a task than, the mass market. The mass market stuff markets itself, and they don't actually want you really involved in the marketing.
Right. Yeah.
Whereas with the self-published, you have to come on crappy podcasts.
That's not true. I mean, this is also not, the Exquisite Crime and Suburban, like both of those are not self-published. Those are just like published by other.
Well, this is a crappy podcast, but you can't,
And also, this is not a crappy podcast, by the way.
I've watched every one.
I would argue this is a fun podcast to be on, and everyone should be on it.
Well, there you go.
Not everyone.
Yeah,
cool people should be on it.
And mainly GMs. That's that's mainly what we're talking about here, theoretically running games. Well, Banana, you have been very gracious with your time. I really appreciate it. We close every episode with the same set of questions. So, what is your favorite system to run?
My favorite.
Your favorite game,
to run. Oh gosh. This is a hard question. I like a lot of games. I really like 10 Candles. And I also really like most PBTA games.
We had Morgan Nuncio on, and she is the queen of the apocalypse, as I
yes.
But I'm a big Powered by the Apocalypse fan as well, and she actually has a spreadsheet of every single Powered by the Apocalypse game, and it's like 300. It's crazy. There's so
Oh
many.
my God.
Um,
That's really cool.
do you have like a favorite do you have like a one of the niches
Oh,
you really like?
Monster Hearts,
Oh yeah, okay,
100%.
yeah.
Yeah, Monster Hearts, it got me into role playing like this, so I can't say anything
I
bad about
am
it.
genuinely shocked that how much fun I had playing the like World Wrestling Federation powered by the
Oh,
Apocalypse game.
yes.
Because like that's not my world, but it was just such a silly and fun game.
It's so
Uh,
good.
I really had a good time, and I love the idea of the GM is the owner of the company, so they decide who's going to win and lose. Because spoiler alert,
Yeah.
wrestling is fake. And that just added a whole neat thing to it of like vindictive GMs. I was surprised how much I enjoyed that. What is a system you haven't run that you really want to run?
Alien. I really want to run Alien. I just played it. And I love the dice mechanics. Like the dice pool is just like so satisfying. I
Yeah,
love
my
it.
buddy Dave Sokolowski is super into it. He is big into Alien, and he's like, I want to run this for everybody. I got to get that book. I've only heard good things about it.
Yeah. I really want to play like a spooky, scary game.
And so the final question every time is the Space Jam question. Martians have invaded the Earth, and they will destroy the planet where I keep all my stuff unless you run them a fantastic 4-hour game. So, Banana Chan, what 4-hour game are you running to save the Earth?
Would it be ironic if I ran a Kids on Bikes? I would probably run I'll run Dads on Mowers. Why not? I know that system. I know that game.
Are you what is the message you're trying to convey there to our alien overlords?
I'm trying to tell them that we're cool. Humans are fun. Look at us. We're fun peoples. And also a daddy dating simulator. I mean, that's just fun.
Maybe the aliens appreciate that. I mean, maybe that's
and aliens are written into the scenario. So
it's true. But now you need an alien sensitivity reader.
Oh yeah, it's true. Oh. I mean, maybe I'll ask one of them.
The Earth gets destroyed because they're like, we would never say that. That's offensive. That's awesome. The last time I did this with Honey, she actually ran a game that suggested destroying the Earth.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, I always am amused by the answers to that question.
I love it.
So, folks, find Banana on Twitter. I think it's just at Banana Chan, right?
No, it's not at Banana Chan Games.
Oh, there we go. Yeah.
Yeah.
That presupposes that there's at Banana Chan work, at Banana Chan.
Oh yeah. At Banana Chan
dinner.
It's
just pictures
restaurant. It's just like
it's specific niches. That's all you're about. That's your oeuvre. And we put up the links. They'll be also in the description here for her current Kickstarters. And I think the PDF of Jiangshi is out, right?
Yes, it is on DriveThruRPG. The physical copies are on their way. They are being shipped.
It's very rare that I pull the board game world loves the track the boat that this is coming on for Kickstarters. You should throw that out there for people.
Yeah, I mean it's here. Like the copies are in the US.
Just waiting to get off the boat.
They're just sort of I'm not sure what's going on actually. I just know that they're here. They're just like being distributed in various places. This is a good
time to remind the 6 people that watch this, be nice to your Kickstarter creators right now, because this is a terrible time for global shipping and for getting anything anywhere. And that is like 80% of Kickstarter. So be kind to everyone involved in that Kickstarter you love, and remember why you loved it. Don't fixate on it not being there.
Yeah. We paid 3 to 4 times as much as we should have for shipping. So it sort of killed us.
Yeah, this is not a good. They're far more unhappy about it than you are. Trust me.
Mm-hmm.
They're feeling it. Well, thank you so much, Banana, for being here and for
Thank you.
helping to keep the game moving.
Thank you so much for having me.
Goodbye, internet friends.
Bye.